Hey everyone, it's Colin. After the release of this new Arkham game and actually getting a chance to play through it, I can say I've really been in the Batman mood. The problem is I've played through all the Arkham games countless numbers of times and I'm just kind of looking for something new. So I figured why not take a look at what came before the Arkham franchise. But mainly those games themed after the explosive animated series which came in the 90s, Batman the Animated Series. I mean, this was the first time Kevin Conroy showed up as Batman. So what other way would we start other than jumping right into the first one to come out? Batman the Animated Series for the Game Boy was a very impressive Game Boy game. It shares a lot of mechanics to the very popular Batman game on the NES. It also sports a very dark environment. Well, that is if you're not playing on that original Game Boy screen, which is green, blistering green. Now looking back at the game today, it's obviously not anything super impressive. And I'd also argue it's probably the weakest of all the Batman games we're going to be looking at today. With that being said though, the game is a huge step up compared to the Superman's counterpart. Yeah, we took a look at that game a couple months ago and it's not even close. That game blows. Going right into the next game though, we got another in the Game Boy lineage, this time being the little brother to the Game Boy, the Game Boy Color. Now Batman Chaos in Gotham is an extremely good game, and I would seriously call it a hidden gem on the platform. The sprites are really good for a Game Boy Color game and the environments are very impressive. They're immersive and they make you feel like you're playing the show. Now the only thing I would probably dock some points for is the repetitive music that plays throughout the entire game. Like seriously, we're talking about an 8-second loop that just goes over and over and over. But no, I'm seriously impressed with how they've packed so much into a Game Boy Color cartridge. The controls are expertly crafted. I don't know how you're able to do as many moves with only 2 buttons. The game has a lot of fun platforming and some simple beat 'em up mechanics as well. Overall, I'm very impressed with this title and pretty enthralled by what the development team was able to put together back in 2001. Because the Game Boy Color wasn't exactly top spec in 2001. Now the next one's going to be the first 3-dimensional game on our list. And spoiler alert, it's definitely not anything to write home about. Gotham City Racer is a PS1 game where you drive around Gotham in a Batmobile or other Batman vehicles of the sort, trying to stop criminals or just trying to beat them to certain locations. The most common complaint with this game is that the story isn't original, it just rips things from Batman the New Adventures, and the controls and gameplay are overall just stiff and underwhelming. I wouldn't say Gotham City Racer is necessarily a bad game, but it's certainly not a good one. Now the concept for this game is really cool. I feel like it could be very well executed if it wasn't on the PS1. And maybe if it had a better known development team. Those two things never really set it up for success. The world you are driving in is kind of semi-open world-esque, which for the PS1 I will admit is pretty impressive. But this doesn't really add exploration or variety to the gameplay because most of the paths you go on seem like they only have one route anyways. Overall, it's a pretty lackluster tie-in game to this legendary franchise. Now we're starting to get into where these games get good. This next one is the most recent one to come out, which was in 2003. Entitled Batman Rise of Sin Tzu. Now this game is praised for one specific thing, and that is introducing an original character to the DCAU. Now as we know, Batman the Animated Series brought us Harley Quinn, but original characters being made from video games was not a very common thing, even to today's standards. So back then, it was extremely unheard of. Now Batman Rise of Sin Tzu is a pretty decent game, pretty good beat 'em up for the 6th generation of consoles. You have multiple members of the Bat family in this game, such as Batman, Robin, Nightwing, Batgirl. I also like to mention I thought it was kind of funny that the voice actor for Robin in this game is the same that is in Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go. They didn't get the original one, but I'm not complaining because this Robin voice is iconic. Now the characters do pretty much all play the same. If you're really getting into it, Robin and Batgirl have a slightly faster moveset than Batman and Nightwing, but other than that, they're pretty much identical. The only other differences you'll really notice is just animations. Now they do all have upgradable moves, and I will say that does help a lot to add to the gameplay variety, because most of the missions do start to end up very samey the further you get on. At the start of the game, you pretty much only have a 3-punch combo and a 3-kick combo. So when you do finally upgrade your character and unlock more, it does help spice things up to keep it a little bit more fresh. But with that being said, the biggest thing that holds this game back is just the repetitive gameplay loop. You're just beating up bad guys through the entire level. It's pretty brain dead and mindless. Every enemy is the exact same. This game is definitely best played with a friend or just a second player while you're having a chill, laid-back conversation and not paying too much to the actual game itself. Definitely better for a conversation piece than a sit-down narrative type game. Now we have 2 games left, and yes, I saved the best ones for last. The first one of the 2 is The Adventures of Batman and Robin for the SNES. Now the interesting thing about this game, and a kind of unique features that happened with a lot of games in the 80s and the 90s, is that when the game released on different platforms, you got a different version for each platform. What I mean by that is there's an SNES version, which is like a side-scrolling beat-em-up platformer. There's a Genesis version, which plays more like a Contra game featuring Batman. There's also a Game Gear version, in which I haven't really seen any gameplay of, or I haven't played myself, so I won't personally be speaking on that or the Genesis version, mainly just the SNES, which is commonly referred to as the best one of the 3. This game came out in 1994, and the first thing I want to get out of the way is how goddamn amazing the game looks. All the footage you're seeing here was captured from me recording my CRT, and there's something magical about those older composite inputs on a 32-inch Sony Trinitron. But nonetheless, the game looks fucking amazing. It is the perfect 16-bit representation of the iconic Batman the Animated Series, and I honestly don't think it could have gotten any better than this. And the title song plays as you're booting up the game just makes you feel so pumped up and energetic, and really just helps build that immersion. It is such a masterpiece when it comes to that side of things. And when it actually comes to gameplay, it's very decent. I would say it's a good game. Hell, maybe even a great game. Each level is essentially a different episode from the Batman the Animated Series. And you have it all kicked off with Joker at the very beginning, which just gives this an electric start to the game. And also, this game's pretty damn hard. Like, the normal sections are pretty easy themselves, all the way up until you get to the actual boss fights. Because these guys have like way too much health, and they're absolutely ruthless. You only have 3 rests, and you can only take a couple of hits before you die. And those 3 rests last the entire game. So if you lose a couple in the first 2 levels, you'll be locked to just 1 in your continues for the rest of the game. So if you lose more than like half of them in the first half of the game, you're pretty much done for. Also, Robin's in this game, although you can't play as him. And in fact, he's pretty utterly useless. Like, seriously, this dude just stands around and then gets himself captured. God damn it, Dick. Always Dick's fault. That one's from my roommate, Gio. Anyways, this game is absolutely awesome, and I would recommend to everyone that you buy it, but I just simply can't. And the reason is, this game is ungodly expensive for some reason. And it's specifically this SNES version of the game. I think it's rare or something. I'm not honestly 100% sure about that, but it's almost impossible to get your hands on a copy for less than 120 bucks. Now, I did not pay that much for the game. What's funny about this is that my mom's actually a thrifter. And, you know, she knows I collect games and all that, and she knows I love Batman. So she was at an Ark thrift and saw a Batman game for the SNES, and she sent me a picture of it. And I thought she was at some like flea market, right? Thought it was gonna be like, what, 100 bucks maybe? So like, okay, yeah, I'm like, cool. I'm not buying that right now. And then I see the caption right underneath that text message, and it goes, $3, do you want it? I don't think I've ever called anyone so fast to make sure they buy something right then. Still see the price line. I don't know if you guys can see it from that far, but it says $2.99. It's an old Blockbuster copy, which means this sucker's actually authentic. It's even got some Sharpies with a code to level 7. Yeah, someone wrote on the cartridge back then, which is easy to take off, but I kept it on mainly just because I'm like, that's pretty cool. So yeah, shout out to the Pixelmon for that. I am never saying that one again. But anyways, let's get back on topic and let's get to the next one. Now, last but certainly not least, we have Batman Vengeance, which most of the time I feel like is regarded as the best Batman game that's not Arkham. And I will say this game does have a lot going for it. I personally played it on the original Xbox, which was at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second. Take that, PS2 fans. But anyways, this game does support an original story, and it definitely lives up to the hype. Now, playing this game in a post-Arkham world does make its impact a little bit less substantial, but as I've said, I do really love the animated series it's based around and that art style. The game has you platforming, doing stealth, doing combat, gliding from rooftop to rooftop, you know, your common Batman stuff. And it does control quite nicely. The only odd thing with the controls, I would say, is that, well, you get thrown to a first-person mode every time you actually want to use a gadget, which can be a little bit off-putting to find your bearings in a certain situation when you first get into it. But once you get used to it, it's really nothing to talk about. I would argue the weirdest thing though is how the combat's actually done. First off, I do want to say I do like the way the developers made this different from other superhero games of the time. Even different from the way they do combat now in games. So basically when you first get into an encounter with an enemy, you go into this one-on-one mode with the opponent, which gives you a Tekken-like control combat style. And this helps you do combos with your feet or fists to actually take down your enemies. Now this combat does take a lot more precision than I'm used to seeing from a lot of superhero games, especially around this time, with most of them just being button mashers. And it is a little odd that you only fight one enemy at a time, because if you get in a scenario where there's two, the other one will just kind of linger and stand there. But you can't really fight waves of enemies with this kind of control style, so I get why they didn't. Another weird thing is you also have to handcuff your enemies when they're on the ground so they can't get back up. Problem is, you can actually run out of handcuffs, so you have to strategically use these and see what enemies you want to permanently get out of the fight. And this game also does a very good job of capturing the environment of Gotham, especially for the animated series. The cel-shaded look definitely helps it age quite a bit. I will say Batman of all people does kind of look the most chunky and blocky, but all the other character models look really impressive for the time and still hold up to today's standards. Kevin Conroy is also Batman again, which just makes this game that much better. Flashback to our little tribute about a year ago with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And now we gotta do a little tribute at the end. Still got the statue right there. This game, kind of like the last, also each level is basically a different episode. Only this time, they're original. My favorite one's probably the Mr. Freeze level. There's just something about the winter and that cold, icy environment that always gets me in these Batman games. And also that he's not really utilized in a lot of Batman games. Also, his boss fight was really fun. The last level on the blimp with the Joker was also a lot of fun. One, because you get to fight the Joker, but two, it also requires some precise platforming. One thing about this game is there is a lot of noticeable things that got ripped from it that are used in the Arkham games. So I bet this did inspire Rocksteady in some ways. Not to mention Batman Begins also came out in this exact same generation and also borrows a lot from this game. So it definitely did a lot right. Now, if you were to go out and get one of these to play, I think Batman Vengeance would definitely be the one to do. The SNES title does have a major disadvantage in the fact that, well, it's not a cheap price. But third of all, I'd probably give it to Batman Chaos in Gotham. That's seriously a really good Game Boy Color game. Definitely underrated. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up with all the Batman the Animated Series specific DCAU games. I had a lot of fun making this video and I absolutely love the universe, especially Batman. I already did make a Superman video featuring all of his games and you guys seem to like that one. But if you haven't seen it, go check it out because there's actually a Superman game in there that's really good. And yeah, that's not a common thing. And there's also just a lot more Batman games that came before Arkham. So if you want to see me talk about those or any games you have in your mind, please drop it down in the comments below and leave a like on the video. It also doesn't hurt to subscribe if you want to, because I'm trying to grow this channel so I can keep doing stuff like this. And last thing, I do stream on Twitch whenever I'm capturing footage. So if you do want to chat with me while I'm getting footage for the next video, you can see it at Its Contrast on Twitch. I'll leave the link in the description below. But yeah, that's all I got for this one, and I'll see you in the next one on The Pixel Critic.